Looking to take your financial knowledge to the next level? You're in the right place. Welcome to Ask Ralph, offering accounting, technical, and financial advice. Whether you're looking to save taxes or improve your business, he's got you covered. Here's your host of Ask Ralph, Ralph Eastup Jr.
Welcome back to the Ask Ralph Show. Today I thought I'd start a series on payroll. Now, payroll is one of those things as a small business owner that can really get you in trouble quickly. So I thought I'd start a series on this. Today we're going to talk about the 5 payroll basics every employer should know. Then we're going to get into some common payroll issues. We're going to talk about reasons you might want to consider outsourcing your payroll. We're going to talk about the 7 things that small business owners should know about payroll tax problems. And then finally, to end this series, we're going to talk about the consequences of willful failure to pay payroll taxes. So before we get into any of those things, I thought we'd start off with a real basic understanding or a basic discussion of payroll. So payroll is something that all of us are probably used to, either we're as being an employer or as an employee. Now, there was a article written by the company Square. Now, many people might know the company Square as a company that handles credit card processing. If you are a small business owner, you may use a Square, or if you've been out shopping and you've come across small business owners, you might be paying with using Square. But it's basically a company that does credit card processing. So let's assume you've hired your first employee. Now you've got to think about, what are the things that I need to do to get started with this? And this is a very pertinent question. I had a client, a couple in this week, and they've got a small business and they're starting to look at payroll. And it was a frank discussion. We got to sit down and talk about what's going on. And there were some things that I was able to bring out that they hadn't considered. So let's start jumping right into it. Now, the first thing you're going to have to decide, once you decide, yes, we're going to have payroll, is what are you going to do for pay periods and pay days? And what I mean by that is, one of the first decisions you have to make is your pay schedule. When are your employees paid for certain days of work? Now, in our practice, what we generally recommend clients do is have payday on Friday, okay? So let's say that payday is going to be this Friday. Well, then the payroll period, or the hours, the time we're going to assemble the hours, would either end on Saturday or Sunday prior to the payroll period. So in other words, let's say that you're working this week. So let's say the payroll period ends on Saturday. That gives you enough time to get your payroll done before the payroll deadline. And if you're going to use an outsourced company like ourselves, you're going to need a few days to do that. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. In that decision, are you going to pay weekly? Are you going to pay bi-weekly? Are you going to pay semi-monthly? What I mean by semi-monthly, are you going to pay on the 15th and 30th or some derivation therein? Are you going to pay monthly? So this is something that, you're going to have to make that decision first, because you're going to want to let your employees know what to expect, and you're going to need to set up your payroll system based on that. So once you decide on that, then you need to talk about what taxes that you need to collect both from your employee and the employer. Now, when it comes to payroll taxes, there's really 2 distinct parties, employees and employers. Both are required to pay taxes on wages. Now, for example, in the general model, if you have an employee working for you, you're going to pay Social Security tax and Medicare tax. Now, the way that works is the employer pays half of that, or matches it, the Social Security, and the employee pays half of it. Same thing with Medicare. Now, in order to determine the other deductions, you're going to need to get a Form W-4 from each of your employees. And what that will do is it'll give you an idea of how much the employee wants to have withheld in federal and state taxes. Now, the federal and state taxes are something that come directly out of the employee's payroll, and it's not something you have to match. Now, in addition to the Social Security and Medicare, most states require you to pay state unemployment and then federal unemployment. And then depending upon, what jurisdiction you're in, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, you might have some other things too. So one of the questions we get a lot from clients is, Ralph, how much should I assume the payroll taxes are going to be? And that's kind of a loaded question. And the reason I say that's a loaded question is what I just talked about is the federal taxes, the withholding taxes are going to be a reduction in the cash flow that's going to the employee. The same thing as the state withholding. But the Social Security and Medicare are really the taxes you're talking about. Now, when you combine Social Security and Medicare, the total tax is 15.8%. But like I said, you pay half and the employee pays half. So effectively, let's say you're giving an employee a $100 paycheck. That's a real simple equation. Well, the Social Security withholding would be $15.80, Social Security and Medicare. Now, but you're only going to pay half of that, so $7.65. But the thing you need to understand is that that's with each payroll period. So once you've decided on, setting up, when your pay cycle is going to be, collecting employee and employer taxes, then you need to talk about paying these taxes. And this is where I find, most people get themselves in trouble. And that's because there are requirements based on the amount of payroll that you have, whether you have to pay your taxes semi-weekly, monthly, or in some cases quarterly. Now, when it comes to the IRS, the minimum they're going to want is for you to pay that monthly. Now, I've heard a lot of people say, well, yeah, but Ralph, I can just do it quarterly because they just send me a form quarterly. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But for the most part, you need to pay your taxes on a monthly basis. Now, once your payroll reaches a certain level, and I believe it's $50,000 per quarter in federal withholding and Social Security and Medicare, then you're going to be required to do what's called semi-weekly. And basically the way that would work is if your employee's payday is on Friday, you have until the following Wednesday to make that tax deposit. And that's really because the IRS wants their money before you can use it for other things. Now, in addition to that, you're going to have to take care of filing quarterly reports, such as the Form 941. You're also going to have year-end reports such as the W-2 and the W-3 and the 940. Now, if you're in Delaware, you're also going to have a quarterly report called a UC-8, which is your Delaware unemployment. Now, one of the things that you don't want to overlook is that you always have federal, state, and sometimes local taxes. Now, in Delaware, this could be something as simple as the City of Wilmington tax. And a lot of my new clients will miss that. If you've got an employee who either works in the City of Wilmington or who lives in the City of Wilmington, technically you should be withholding Wilmington taxes from them. That's something we can talk about at another time. Now, the final thing you need to decide is how you're going to handle timekeeping. Timekeeping is something you need to do. You need to track the hours worked by hourly non-exempt employees. Non-exempt meaning that they're not on salary. Most workers are classified as either exempt or non-exempt depending upon their salary and the type of work they do. Now, this is where it gets complicated. You need to look into the FLSA or the state of Delaware has a Department of Labor, which will lay out basically the requirements for timekeeping. Now, this is something you want to focus in on from the front end. So you need to decide, how are my employees going to report their time to me? Are we going to have a time clock? Are we going to have some sort of call-in system? It's very important to get a grip on that so that when you get to the end of that first payroll cycle, you'll know what to pay to the employees. And you're also going to think about, how you're going to handle overtime, how you're going to handle, sick time or paid vacation time. So I hope this was a good introduction to payroll, the 5 basics every employer should know, and we'll continue the series with our next session.
You've been listening to Ask Ralph, brought to you by Sazio Accounting Plus. Please subscribe to and rate our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a rating and review. Our podcast is produced by Carolyn Peters. Thank you for listening, and be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Ask Ralph Media. You can also hear me each week on 1450 WILM and on 1410 WDOV in Delaware and on the iHeartRadio app. Submit your questions or ideas for future shows by sending an email to AskRalph@AskRalph.com.
The information contained in this episode of Ask Ralph is based on data available as of the date of its release. Sagio Accounting Plus and Ask Ralph Media Inc. is under no obligation to update this content if changes occur. Applying this information to your specific situation requires careful consideration of all facts and circumstances, and any information provided is not to be considered as financial, tax, or legal advice. Please consult your tax advisor or attorney before acting on any material covered.